Red Bull has had a lot of bad luck over the past couple of years, but they've also made a lot of bad decisions. We'll talk about the bad luck in a minute, but let's go back to where their problems started, which have to do with balance, in which Newey could sense as far back as 2023 that their car was not where it should be. But he stated that because Verstappen is such a fantastic driver, that it was masking the problem. Meanwhile, they still had a big gap on the rest of the other teams, but by the time not even midway through the first quarter of last season, we saw the emergence of McLaren and of Ferrari having caught Red Bull, and that's when it became clear that there was something wrong. And at that point, it might have been too late not too late, but Red Bull was in real trouble because they hadn't addressed an issue that goes back as far as 2023 in Spain after they changed their floor height. So whatever that problem really is in total, it led to them being caught with what they call it, the asymmetric device and other things. But all of this just points to the problem that they were having issues with balance, and there was a lot of understeer in the car, and Max was not happy, and ultimately Checo had to leave, and I think it was probably because of this performance issue. What are your thoughts about that, Falabi, before we move forward?
Yeah, I quite agree with you. And I think it's one of the reasons why Red Bull actually refused his request for a low downforce rear wing, because they want to really focus on where the issues are. And like you rightly mentioned, where the issues are car balance. It was a bumpy ride in some of the circuits last season. And if you look at it, the team seems to be prioritizing fixing the overall balance issues of the RB20. The grid is very competitive. They may believe addressing fundamental car stability may just be what they need. And that is why I guess they threw back that low downforce wing thing. They want to focus more of their energy on the fundamental problem, which is stability, first and foremost.
Well, here's the problem. They don't have a stable platform or anything. But the problem is that especially the low downforce wing, which is good for tracks like Monza and other things, and Vegas, has become an integral part of F1. McLaren has them. Now, McLaren's mini DRS was bad, but still, over the past 3 years since Red Bull has been dominating, McLaren has been slowly building their balance based on Flexi wings. Red Bull didn't take that road because it had been banned in 2022. And this goes to the inconsistency of the FIA. They choose when to ban these things and when not to. So moving forward, McLaren and Mercedes and Ferrari to a lesser extent have been focusing on stability and balance through the Flexi wings rather than through the chassis and the floor. But the problem Red Bull had is they got caught unawares last year when they had balance issues, and they didn't have low downforce back wing, or even front wing too. They didn't have, and they weren't incorporating Flexi wings. So what they were having to do is continually tinker with their floor height and then go from race to race for setup. Whereas McLaren already has a stable platform, regardless of their Flexi wings, but the Flexi wings just augment it. So this is a mystery as to what McLaren's secret is for such fantastic balance. It's not just their Flexi wings. I think the Flexi wings are almost 50% of it, but they literally have a good concept of aerodynamics, which Red Bull doesn't. And this goes back to where Newey was saying that at some point him and Wache did not see eye to eye on the developmental path that Red Bull should go on. And so he left. And Newey said that F1 is not static. Just because we're winning now, you have to adapt because the ground forces makes things so chaotic and erratic that every moment you have to change what direction you're going forward in. Whereas Red Bull just said, we're just going to go straight forward because we have Max. I think, to be honest with you, I think this is Horner and the owners and whoever the owning interests are in that team. They're just trying to save money. And they thought that because Verstappen is so good and they're so far ahead, they didn't realize that McLaren was at night, like in the Bible, say, while others are sleeping, I'm toiling through the night. And ultimately Newey leaves Red Bull. And this might be the reason he left, is because he did not have enough power to focus on which direction they're supposed to move. What their first big move was in 23 for the Spanish Grand Prix, where they lowered their floor height. And that's where the problem started. But it wasn't perceptible to most people because Max is so good and the other teams were behind. So now this year, like you said, Max has asked for low downforce spec wings. And the team says, we don't have the money because they spent all their money focusing on the Flexi wing for the front Flexi wing. And now the FIA has said that it's going to be banned. So let's go to that point now. So they're saying that it's going to be banned. After all this work that Red Bull has done, they're going to ban it now. So now Red Bull is left to hang. Meanwhile, they didn't ban it last year when McLaren was using it all year. And now they say, okay, well, we're going to ban it, I think, 6 or 7 weeks into the season. So this gives McLaren more time to stay ahead and take advantage of what they have at Red Bull. But at the same time, they've developed the concept so well that when they now move away from the test, whenever the low tests are, they can still find loopholes and pass the test afterwards and do well. Whereas Red Bull is nowhere on the development and they need to scrap it. And they have they're now in a crisis in which they have to figure out what's their concept for this year is going to be, because it's not going to be a design concept anymore. What do you think, Falabi?
I agree with you. I think.
And hold on, it can't be a design concept because they don't have time and resources.
Yes,
because their design concept was based on the Flexi wing. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah,
they don't have the resources because they were very profligate. They wasted so much money on the Flexi wings. And I think,
but hold on. I want to jump in and defend them. I want to defend them. I wouldn't use the word profligate. You know why? Because who would have foreseen that these wings would be banned? So I'm thinking that the FIA set them up, because if they were going to ban this thing, they banned the mini DRS last year. They should have also banned the front, but they allowed it to continue going. And then that gave a message to Red Bull that, oh, we can continue to develop this because it won't be banned. And then all of a sudden, just before the beginning of the season, they banned it. So I wouldn't say they're being profligate. I would just say that they were unfortunate in which their resources were spent, not unwisely, but in vain, because nobody foresaw this ban. Yeah, continue. Sorry. Yeah.
Yes, I feel they were, unfortunate, and they felt FIA regulations will remain lenient on the Flexi wings. But McLaren, however, on the other hand, because when FIA banned mini DRS after Baku in 2024, they were one of the teams that were able to comply. So I feel...
Yeah, it wasn't even a ban. What they did was they changed it so that FIA wouldn't outright ban it, but it was understood. Then the FIA later on made specs for it. But my argument, and I keep going back to this, is that they've already innovated the back wing. So now that they have those load tests, so now the load tests are going to be, they have load tests even for the mini DRS. But what it does is they just up to the what's the word I would use, the sensitivity of the test, so that they could go to higher forces so that they can't cheat when they're at high speed. But the thing is that they already have the technology to understand loopholes around that, because it's based on how many millimeters movement. They'll just recalibrate it, but they still have the system set in place, whereas Red Bull doesn't, and it's going to be banned, and Red Bull won't even be able to appreciate any loopholes because there's no prototype for them to build a loophole on top of. You see what I'm saying? Go ahead. Yeah.
And if you look at McLaren, they were not so much in solidarity in fighting against the directive by FIA, because they had already reaped the benefits in 2023 and early 2024. Flexi wings thing. So they had already benefited from it. So they were somehow ready for this kind of clampdown. So
for the transition, they're ready for the clampdown and transition.
Exactly. Yeah. So they just
Red Bull can't even transition because they don't have any low downforce wings, and they don't have a developed front Flexi wing. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Yes, the whole of their research and development strategy seems very flawed, because we really don't know where exactly they want to focus on. Because like we started this conversation with balance.
Yeah, but you're saying that it's flawed. I just want to remind you that no, they don't have a flawed plan. That whatever their plan was has now been banned by FIA. So I'm going to put it on the FIA. It's just like, let's say they tell us at the beginning of the season, the car should only weigh such and such. So now I start working with that concept. Then all of a sudden you tell me, oh, when the car can weigh more now. It's that new rule that has wasted my research money. So what I'm saying is that them changing the rule at such a late hour, less than a month before the season starts, to me, that's it's either very unethical because you're doing
it's unfair. It's unfair. We can actually say it's unfair.
Or it's definitely unfair. Whether it's not, it's not fair. No matter what their intentions are, it's not fair. But any last thoughts on that?
Spent a lot of money on the Flexi wings thing, and if you look at their budget, they probably are not looking to on that side anymore. They want
they don't have resources.
They are focusing on their balance, and they have a portion of their team depleted. Adrian Newey has gone, and some other technical guys have gone as well.
Yeah. So what Wache has said now is that they're going to have a wide window, which means that
Wide
they
window.
have the possibility for a lot of speed, but they're not going to have a refined, stable setup, which goes well for the whole season. So what they're going to do is basically focus on setup from race to race to race to race, rather than having a stable platform. So like McLaren doesn't have to worry so much about setup from race to race because they have a very good balance across all tracks. And they also have a good balance between high speed and low speed. They've got good downforce, but they've also got wings, which are, well, the Flexi wing is going to be gone, but they have ways in which they can adapt when they're on the high speed corners to have downforce, or when they're in the straight. So they're not that great on the straight actually, but nobody's better on technical corners than McLaren. And also McLaren is very good on high speed corners, and they do pretty well on low speed, which requires more down, because McLaren doesn't have a lot of downforce.
No, they don't.
But they have very good balance. A lot of us don't know how they're doing it. Maybe it's, I don't know. And then also they have very good grip. So what's going to happen with Red Bull, as I said, is that they're just going to have to tinker with the setup for each race. They're going to have to improvise from race to race. That's going to be very stressful for them. I think they might want, I think Wache is taking a risk. They might want to just set up their car in a certain way based on the tracks that they know they do very well in, like Vegas and some of the later tracks during the end of the year, Abu Dhabi, Qatar, and things like that, and just try to go with a concept that looks at those things, but still tries to stay adaptable. But what they're saying now, the way that they're terming their philosophy now, is that they want to be adaptable. That just means from race to race, we change our setup. Their setup is going to be, each from race to race, their changes in setup are going to be very radical. Changes in setup for McLaren and Mercedes will be almost consistent from race to race. But these guys are going to have radical setups because they don't have a universal stable platform. You see what I'm saying? Red Bull. Yeah. What are your thoughts?
So
I think that's how it was last year. From week to week, they changed their ride height, everything. But they need to address. Hopefully, they can try to get some type of rear wing lower spec for low downforce tracks. But the thing is that whatever it is, it's going to have to be done hastily without taking the time to develop it. So it may not work. It may work, but it may not. What are your thoughts, Afolabi? Yeah.
I feel if they can start the season well and get a head start, because I think the rule change comes in around Spain. That's where the rule change.
Yeah, Spain, yeah.
So if they can have a good head start over their rivals, then it could help them. So when it gets to Spain and they start playing catch up, they may begin to tweak their setup,
Here's the problem.
Race to race. Especially
here's the problem.
Teams like Ferrari and Mercedes.
Yeah. Here's the problem. The front flexi wing won't be banned until 6 or 9 races into the season. So it means that meanwhile, McLaren, they're not going to have, Red Bull may not have a good start to the season because McLaren is ahead of them and will be able to exploit that front flexi wing. You get my point? So you're saying that you're right. Red Bull needs to get a good start, but how do you get a good start when the rules are allowing the flexi wing and yours hasn't been fully developed? But you're right. They may have been developing their wing. So if I were them, I would push forward and keep, like you said, I would keep developing that flexi wing, even though it's going to be banned after 8 races. Use it now and do the best you can in 8 races, and then figure out, and then you can start doing your setup to setup to setup. You're right. So you said, okay, the flexi wheel isn't banned. They need to spend every penny they can now in the tunnels, everything, figuring out how to maximize that. And then after that, they can go to the adaptability where, well, this thing is banned and we don't know where to move developmentally. Now we'll do setup to setup from race to race to race, not even from race to race, setup from free practice 1, free practice 2, free practice 3, all the way to Q1. And then you can't change your setup once you start getting into the qualifiers. Yeah. What are your thoughts? So so your point is good. So I didn't disagree. I didn't disagree with your point. They do need to get out ahead fast, but the problem is that McLaren is already ahead of them. So my guess is McLaren should be favorites for the first couple of races. Their times have been the fastest in Barcelona testing. Yeah, go ahead.
Yes. And even Ferrari could gain an advantage, especially as Red Bull scrambles to reallocate resources and redesign aerodynamics.
Yeah.
Additionally, they have budget constraints. Like rightly mentioned, a chunk of their development budget has gone into those flexi wings. And now they have to find money from somewhere to fix the underlying problem. That balance thing was
well, and the money is for, and we know how it works. The money is to solve the problem, but that's wind tunnel, testing, but even when you do wind tunnel testing, you have to take into account so many variables so that things correlate. So you have to it has to be a slow process in which you combine, like for example, if you're working with the developing the rear wing, you if you some data may look good in this context, but now you have to think about other things. What if the wind's there, or what if there's tire drag, or what about other parts of the car? So that's the method that McLaren uses. They've been slowly testing things through the wind tunnel, but over a period of 3 or 4 years, so that they can get rid of all the confounding variables and have. So, and to make it simple, because this is scientific stuff, McLaren has a better sim to real world correspondence or correlation, because they take their time in the testings and they do hundreds and hundreds of tests thoroughly, checking out all other variables: floor height, wind, the speed of the wind, the types of surfaces of the tracks they have, the purposing and everything. So it's a matter of time. But so even if you have a lot of money sometimes can't buy you the time you need. But if you put a lot of money in, you can make the best of the short time that you have to develop it. All right, what are your thoughts, Afolabi? Then we can get out of here.
I quite agree with you. McLaren seems to, their simulation is top notch. I think it's because of their technology, the output and the results they get from their simulation.
And the time they take for it,
And the time they take for it always translates into real-time results, and it affects their performance on the track. I feel also that Red Bull should take a nuanced view towards this Max Verstappen's request of this low downforce thing, because he's the driver. At the end of the day, you know how petty Max Verstappen can be. Once things go south, he could be.
He's gonna biatch. He's gonna biatch.
Start complaining about that. I told you I want.
He's gonna biatch.
You know, even if they don't have the money, they shouldn't throw it out of the window. Max
Verstappen should join. He should join Riley. I like Riley. I watched it the other night. Beautiful. What did you think about Riley? That was beautiful, man.
Wasn't it beautiful? The thing is fun, but it's crazy.
Fun, man. I'm gonna get the TV, start watching it all day. It makes me think I'm in.
They crash like F1 in rally.
Oh, those guys crash, but they don't. Their cars are like tanks. So when they crash, it's more like damage to the tires and everything. But
because it's covered. It's completely covered.
Yeah, and they go into the ditches and stuff.
Oh, okay.
All right, so Fabi, any last words of wisdoms, and take us out, please.
Yeah, so basically I feel whether we like it or not, Red Bull is operating at a level of vulnerability. The top engineers have departed and they're having financial issues. Also, this Flexi wing thing, I think, hits them more than any other team. They have to find a way to go mid-season. I think the real thing is for them, mid-season and towards the end of the season is where they will really need to cope. And I think on that note that we're going to round up our show. It's been a wonderful show once again.
Thank you. Nice one. Tomorrow we'll talk about, I think we're going to talk about Raleigh. I'll start sending you notes within the next hour. Homework.
Yeah, and then I heard George Russell was complaining about the constant changing of personnel and executives.
Oh, yeah. We don't have time to talk about that today.
Yeah, we could talk about it tomorrow as well.
Yeah, maybe if you're free in the morning, we can talk about it. Okay. What number shows? How many shows have we done now?
9 now.
9. We're one per day of the month. We're on pace for 30. We were 40 last month.
Oh, yeah.
All right, good one. Nice one. Okay.
All right. See you later.
Bye-bye.